everyone, and welcome to Commanding on a Budget. This week we have two budget picks, Return to Dust and Revoke Existence. Both of these cards can exile artifacts and enchantments to keep them from being reused from the graveyard, and are great when you're facing down indestructible artifacts like Darksteel Plate and Darksteel Forge. Today we're going to take a look at a $50 Skithiryx the Blight Dragon list. Skithiryx is a 4/4 flying infect for 5 mana, but he should be considered to cost 6, since that's what it costs to cast him and give him haste. This deck doesn't have many tricks. It just ramps, draws cards, then suits up Skithiryx with cheap equipment and clears the way for him with removal. You never want to be short on cards in this deck, because that means you're short of ways to make your general win the game. Bloodgift Demon and Graveborn Muse are both Phyrexian Arena on a body. Ambition's Cost and Ancient Craving both do the exact same thing, which is good for us since that thing is allow you to draw 3 cards. Night's Whisper and Sign in Blood are cheaper, less swingy draw spells that are great to cast early in the game. Since casting Skithiryx without haste is just silly, and you don't want to wait until turn 6 to cast your general, some mana ramp is in order. Cryptghast. This deck doesn't play any other mana doublers, but Cryptghast is a mere 4 mana, which means he doubles your mana when it really matters. Pilgrim's Eye grabs you a land and can be handy to strap equipment on since it has flying. Mycosynth Wellspring also grabs a land to keep you from missing those important land drops early game. Solemn Simulacrum puts a land into play tapped and then draws a card when he dies, both of which are things this deck needs. Wayfarer's Bauble is a 3 mana rampant growth, which is fantastic if you're playing mono black. Charcoal Diamond and Cold Steel Heart enter the battlefield tapped, but that doesn't matter too much since they're so cheap. Dark Ritual is a one-shot mana boost to move things along even faster. Everflowing Chalice is a mana rock that can be scaled to your needs. Skull of Ramos taps for black mana and can be sacrificed if you need emergency mana, say 2 mana to regenerate Skithiryx. Vessel of Endless Rest taps for colors and can act as graveyard hate. Worn Power Stone enters the battlefield tapped, which sucks when you're paying 3 mana, but it will be worth it when you untap with it. Now that we have a bunch of cards to smooth out the early game, the only thing left to do is cast Skithiryx and buff him to swing for game. The equipments have cheap equip costs because you want to swing with the equipment attached as soon as possible. Bone Splitter is a super cheap way to turn Skithiryx into a 2-turn clock. Champion's Helm and Swiftfoot Boots. The hexproof is very handy since your opponents will want to kill Skithiryx, and Champion's Helm also makes him bigger. Dolphy Embrace. Giving Skithiryx Shadow is awesome. Giving your opponent's creatures Shadow so they are either unblockable or can't block is just hilarious. Fire Shrieker. If Skithiryx has Double Strike, then even the smallest increase in power will make him a one-swing kill. Hatred and Howl from Beyond will surprise opponents who think they can afford to take a hit from Skithiryx. Lashwraith and Nightmare Lash are more expensive than a lot of the equipment in the deck, but their equip costs don't require any mana, which sort of makes up for the fact that they cost 4 to cast. Stratus Scythe has the most expensive equip cost in the deck, but the ability is swingy enough to warrant its inclusion. Homicidal Seclusion. This deck has only 12 creatures other than Skithiryx. 2 of those are alternate win cons and so probably won't be out with Skithiryx. Only 3 of the creatures in the deck are ones you'll want to keep on the battlefield, which means this card is actually pretty awesome. When your win condition is through combat, you can't afford to have blockers getting in your way. This deck plays a lot of sacrifice removal so that creatures that have Shroud, Hexproof, Protection from Black, or are indestructible won't ruin your day. Fleshbag Marauder makes everyone at the table sacrifice a creature, which will help keep the board from getting too clogged up with creatures. Gatekeeper of Malakir makes someone sack a creature and then gives you a chump blocker. Consume the Meek. This deck tries to race other decks at the table, but you don't want to lose to an aggro player with the same strategy. Corrupt. It is much more expensive than the rest of the removal, but with the high swamp count in the deck, this card should deal a lot of damage, and life gain is much needed in this deck. Tendrils of Corruption. 4 mana is a lot to pay for spot removal, but it has no restriction on what it can target and has the potential to gain a lot of life. Consuming Vapors and Tribute to Hunger are sacrifice removal that gains life. Consuming Vapors can be used twice, which is a bargain for 4 mana. Devour Flesh, Geth's Verdict, and Diabolic Edict are cheap instant speed edicts. Devour Flesh lets them gain life, but you're playing Infect, so it really doesn't matter. Doomblade and Go for the Throat both have restrictions but are solid removal cards. Blight's ending is more expensive but has a much narrower restriction. Murder. It's more mana intensive but can destroy any creature. Shriekmaw. Terror on a body, or just the terror if you're short on mana. Snuff Out. 4 life is a steep cost, but when you tap out for Skithiryx, it's nice to be able to remove a blocker for free. Slaughter. The mana cost is high and the buyback means a lot of life loss, but it's vital that this deck have removal at all times. Just in case Skithiryx can't get there on his own, these cards will help you proliferate all those poison counters. Ichor Rats lets you give everyone a poison counter. Core Prowler. A champion blocker that no one will want to kill. Contagion Clasp. It might be able to pick off a small creature, but even if it doesn't, it's still a cheap way to continually proliferate. Contagion Engine doubles as a one-player sweeper and a game-ending proliferate source. Throne of Geth turns the artifacts you don't need anymore into poison counters for your opponents. With the deck packed full of removal, draw power, and mana ramp, all that's left is to add a few cards to help it run smoothly. Insidious Dreams. Yes, it costs 4 mana, makes you discard, and put the cards on top, but it's still an instant speed tutor. Diabolic Tutor and Increasing Ambition round out the small tutor suite in this deck. Elixir of Immortality can gain life and recycle all your cheap draw power and removal. Mirrorworks. With all the awesome artifacts in the deck, why not add this card so you can copy them? It's crazy with powerful equipments like Lashwraith and makes Throne of Geth even more dangerous. Crystal Ball helps dig for the cards you need to win the game. Let's face it, Skithiryx will probably be target number 1 for the table. These cards will help you end the game without your general. Phyrexian Crusader wears all the equipment intended for Skithiryx very well, and has protection from all those annoying white removal spells. Tainted Strike. Why do all the work for yourself when you can just piggyback on someone else's fatties to win the game? Drana Calistria Bloodchief. If for some reason winning by poison is no longer an option, Drana can pick off blockers and smash face with the help of all the equipment and mana ramp in the deck. With all the cards in this deck that check for swamps, it's important that the deck play as few non-basics as possible, so there are actually only 2. Inkmoth Nexus is another backup win condition, and Rogue's Passage will help you if your opponents have stubborn creatures that refuse to be removed. And then there are 37 swamps. Normally, I wouldn't list a whole bunch of typical staples because the deck could probably get along without them, but this deck really would be improved drastically if just a few of these cards were added. Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, and Mana Vault would help you ramp into Skithiryx that much faster. Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor would help you find game-ending cards. Shaodun the One-Eyed and Yawgmoth's Will get back key cards in the deck. Phyrexian Arena would be another source of draw power that's harder to remove. Liliana of the Dark Realms. She helps you make land drops, removes creatures, and makes Skithiryx bigger, which are all things this deck focuses on. Some of you may have noticed I don't have a huge list of protection swords here. They would be solid additions, but 2 of my favorite swords give protection from black, which means explosive cards like Hatred and Howl from Beyond become useless. It really comes down to personal preference, but I don't think this deck really needs swords. Their equip costs are also more expensive than most of the equipments in this list. You should build this deck if you love poison and proliferate. You want a mono-black deck that isn't focused around Cabal Coffers, Urborg, and similar cards. You love having spot removal in hand for any threat. You like winning even if it means stepping on a few toes. This deck is heavily focused on sticking Skithiryx early in the game in order to kill the entire table with poison damage. Infect isn't exactly the most popular strategy in Commander, so if you want a fun, flavorful deck, then this list isn't for you. This is definitely a spike deck. What's your opinion on Infect in Commander? Let me know in the comments section below, and as always, thanks for watching.